Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am so excited to dive into today's topic. We are talking all about obedience, and obedience is love. Obedience is an expression of love. In several places, Jesus says in the Bible, if you love me, you will obey what I command. First John 5 says, this is love for God that we obey his commands, and his commands are not burdensome. Obedience is our act of love to God, and it's an act of worship. And so many people say how much they love God, like, oh, I love God. Like, God's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. God blesses me and all these things. But yet they don't follow or obey any of his commands. And I can say that because I've been guilty of it. You know, saying I love God, but is my life aligning with that? Does my life prove that? And not that we have to do good or, you know, do these good works to earn his love. That's not where we're going with this. We don't have to be obedient to earn his love. He loves us unconditionally. But what it's saying is when we truly love God within our hearts, like we love God, we're going to walk in obedience because we love him. And so put it this way, say you're in a relationship with, boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, right? And you have specific ground rules that you've discussed because, hey, these things make it known to me that you respect me and you honor me in this relationship. So you've had this discussion, you have certain boundaries in place, which everyone should, based off of whatever that you feel comfortable with. And then, you have this great discussion. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, then your spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend deliberately goes and disobeys all those boundaries, like cheats, says nasty things, disrespects you, whatever it is, like goes against every boundary that you thought you had within the relationship that like made you feel respected and honored. And but then comes back after doing all those things and says, I love you. I mean, I love you, but all those actions show that they don't love you, right? So I love you means nothing after all those actions have shown the opposite. And so it really is true that, sometimes our actions do speak louder than words. And we have to make sure that our words and our actions are aligning. So this is the same with God. We will not see any growth or fruitfulness grow in our relationship with God if we are not obeying his commands. This is a word for the Christians that are feeling stagnant in their faith walk right now. Ask God to search your heart and help you identify what you are not willing to obey. Say you're in this place where, like, why haven't I seen breakthrough? Why is this always happening to me? What have I done to deserve this? Why isn't God answering me? What are you not obeying? Where are you out of alignment in your walk? You keep hitting dead ends because you are not obeying the one command he's been telling you to walk away from, been telling you to let go of, been telling you to speak on or move from. Obeying this one command could be the thing that sets you free from that dead end or that merry-go-round that you've been on. And he's not answering your prayer for financial abundance or breakthrough because you still haven't listened to the last message he sent you to walk away from that friend group that always drags you to the bars and the clubs on the weekends, or you haven't obeyed, starting to tithe to the church or whatever it may be. It could be anything. That's just an example. But why are we entitled to believe that God's just a genie God and that this relationship with him takes no work on our end, no sacrifice on our end? Look at what he sacrificed for us. Jesus was perfectly obedient to God. And because of that, he carried the authority to heal the sick, deliver, and, save us. And now he sits at the right hand of God in the kingdom of heaven. But he sacrificed a lot. He sacrificed a lot. He sacrificed for us on that cross to prove his love for us, to give us eternal life and to have relationship with us. So why do we think that we can just say we love God, but not obey his commands? So
That's good.
go ahead, Laurie, on
I was like,
obedience.
that's just like that's it. That's all we need.
The
No,
episode can end now.
right? Yeah, that's yeah. But here's the thing: when we obey his commands, that's when we get clarity.
Right.
That's when we get purpose. That's when we find comfort. That's where we get direction. And I'm thinking about, we're made in God's image. And so each one of us, we want to be seen and we want to be heard and we want to feel love.
Mm-hmm.
So does God. God wants to be seen. He wants to be heard. He wants to be loved. We
Yeah.
get that because we're made in his image. But what we fail to understand is the greatest comfort and the greatest love and the best way to be seen, the best way to be heard is the one who created you because he knows how you need to be seen. He knows how you need to be heard. He knows where you're going and when you're supposed to get there and how you get there. But when you're not being obedient, he's not going to get you there. You're just going to keep walking around that same mountain. You're going to keep seeing the same things. You're going to have the same reaping because you've been sowing the same thing.
Mm.
So if you want to start seeing abundance and financial breakthroughs and you want your debt wiped clean, then start being obedient what he's asking you to do because that's what he's leading you for. God doesn't want his children to be poor. That doesn't point to him. If all of his children do not have money, then how is his kingdom going to survive? How is it going to be built? It
Right.
can't.
Right.
So he's going to supply all of our needs, but he can't supply them if they're over here on the right and you keep going left. Because you're like, oh, I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do this. Well, then you don't want to see that. So
Mm.
think about that. If you don't want to go right where he's telling you to go, then you're not going to see what's over there on the right. If you keep choosing to go over here to the left because that's what you want, well, then you're not going to get what God has for you.
Right.
You're not even focusing on at all. You're like, I want, so I go.
Yeah.
I want, so I stay in debt. But yet I'm going to blame God for it.
Right.
I want more, but I have less, but I'm going to blame God for it because I didn't do what he said. That doesn't even make any sense. It's like as a parent, you tell the kid, don't, if you do that, this is going to happen. And then that happens and they come crying to you. I was that mom that was like, I told you
Yep.
that was what happened. So my daughter understands consequences very well, cause and effect,
Yep.
going and reaping, because I would allow her, I would tell her, and then she would choose different and then come back to me and I would say, because you didn't listen. So right there, as parents, we already should be teaching our children what it looks like to submit to wisdom. And we, as his children, our wisdom comes from him. And so if we're
Yes.
not going to submit and we're not going to obey what he's asking us to do, then how can we even ask our children to do what we ourselves are not willing to do? That was
Mm.
deep right there. He took me there.
This just lined me up for this statement right here. Your children's obedience is a reflection of your obedience.
Yeah, mic drop.
I know. And we fail to remember too that like these God ordained boundaries are freedom. Like we believe the lie that like being obedient means like stripping us from freedom. Like I want to live my way. Kind of on that subject of submission too, where it's like I don't want to submit to anything. I'm independent. I got my own way of living and this and that. That's not true. Like you are submitted to something, and just because you're not being obedient to God, you're being obedient to the enemy. You're obeying his commands, right? When you're not obeying God's commands, you're obeying other commands, thinking that you're living this life for yourself, you're independent, you're this, you're that. You know, living in that state of rebellion. Rebellion is a form of witchcraft. Like that's darkness to live in rebellion. And that's exactly what Satan got kicked out of heaven for, was rebellion, just that spirit of rebellion and not wanting to obey commands, wanting to be God himself. And so living in these boundaries is freedom because the devil can't touch you. When we live in God's boundaries, he cannot touch you. To me, that's freedom. You're not in the devil's playground. You're under the Father's wing. That's freedom. Obedience brings freedom. And that in itself is so freeing. Like that is powerful to know, like, hey, my obedience puts me in alignment to abundance. My obedience brings abundance because I'm under the Father's wing. I'm not in the devil's playground being disobedient and being rebellious, thinking I'm living for myself, doing my own way, my own thing. Um, that path leads to destruction. It really does. And so, however you want to look at it, there is a balance of wrath that comes with disobedience, but there's so much love like when you're walking in obedience. There's so much love and there's so much grace whenever you do fall short, because guess what? We all do. We all walk into disobedience at some point or another, right? Um, and so God is like, hey, come back to me. Like, I'm still here. You can come back to me, and we have the choice. We have free will. And so that's the thing, is a disobedient heart, you know, when our hearts get so hardened and you just are led down this road of destruction and rebellion and disobedience. I was on that path for a long time, personally, for several years. I was rebellious. I had a hardened heart. I was disobedient. Didn't follow any of my parents' instruction. Definitely didn't follow any of God's instruction. Right. So I wasn't submitting to anyone except for obviously myself and all these other outlets. And it led to destruction. I was empty. Internally, I was empty. I was without God, right? Internally, I had stepped out from under his wing. I was in the devil's playground. But no one's too far gone for God. And I think that's such a beautiful factor, is he will leave the 99 for the one. And just like he came and rescued me from that place, he will come and rescue you or any other person that gets to that place. But we have to get to a place of surrender for him to do that. It has to be met. He will meet you right where you're at, but unless you cry out to him, there's nothing he can do. There's nothing he can do. And so that is like that first act of like obedience, just like, God, like, I need you. Like, I need you. And from there, he's like, come on, grabs your hand, and you're walking on this life and this journey with him. And our entire sanctification process is learning obedience to his commands. And through that process of obeying his commands, we are being sanctified. We are growing closer to him. We are learning more about him. We are learning more about ourselves. We are learning more about this world, right? And it's like, oh, I see you're protecting me from that, God. Thank you. Like, I'm glad I obeyed that command because you were protecting me. And so we see it as a healthy boundary, just like you see it with your kids whenever, you put up the baby gates when they're babies, and it's a healthy boundary. It's so that they don't get in the cabinet and put bleach down their throat. Like, it's to protect them. So God does the same thing for us. And that's why obedience is just so important. But yeah.
Well, I was also thinking like God gives us boundaries so that we can be boundless. Because
Mm.
it's when we step out of his boundary that his protection, Satan gets in,
Yep.
confusion gets in, darkness gets in. Um, all of those things that we don't want in our life get in because God is not in a box. He is omnipresent. He is in all time. He can see what would happen before and he can see what is yet to happen. And that's why he'll create a boundary because he knows what's about to happen. And if we step out of the boundary, then we're going to get caught up in what's about to happen. And he doesn't want us to get caught up in what's about to happen. And yet we find ourselves caught up in with what he was trying to keep us from being in the mix. So really, in essence, when we're in within his boundaries, we're so outside of the box that this world has created and things that we need to be in. That's why we become boundless. It's
Yeah.
crazy when you think about it. His boundaries make us boundless.
Balance. Yep. Yeah. And don't expect no hardships walking in obedience from people, from situations, from it's not sometimes the right thing is not always going to feel so right based off of the outside influences, words, or the way situations are aligning, but it's right from within because the Holy Spirit's telling you it's right. So sometimes obedience isn't just like hallelujah, like everything's aligned. Like, yes, there it is, it's the golden ticket, like I just go this way. I'm being obedient. No, oftentimes odds are very against you whenever you're being obedient. And that's where that faith is produced. That is deepening our faith and our relationship with the Lord when we are walking in those hardships and being obedient to him, even when things aren't making sense around us, even when everyone's telling you that's stupid, even when people are laughing at you and mocking you, because Jesus said they hated me first, right? So even when when we're walking that obedience, just as Jesus did, all the way to the cross. He walked in that obedience. I mean, they were laughing at him. And I think about that in itself, him hanging on the cross and the people mocking him, saying, if you're really the son of God, come down from that cross, right? Just mocking him and tempting him and doing all these things. Like, Jesus could have done anything in that moment, could have done anything, literally just like sent destruction to the whole little town, right? All those people that were hurting him. But he walked in obedience to the Father's will, and look at the result. Nothing made sense about what he was doing, but
Yeah,
it
and
did.
I know, and I'm thinking, and I'm also thinking too, because as they're mocking him and saying, "Huh, come down from the cross," and in his head, he's got to be thinking, "Oh, I'm coming down. I'm coming down and I'm rising back up and I'm going to reappear and you're going to have your mind blown." And that's what God can do for us when because, and I sit here and think about it, if I have to walk through a fire, I want him by my side because then I'm
Yeah,
not going to get touched by it. So that's
right.
how you can look at it. Like my obedience, even though I'm going to have to walk through this fire, he's walking with me. He's not just saying,
Huh.
here, go and shoving me into the fire. He's walking with me through the fire. And that's
Yep.
what we have to learn because sometimes the things that we've been sowing for years, decades, whatever, we can't just undo it. We have to walk through it to the other side.
Mm,
So we can't go under, we can't go over, we can't go around it, we can't shove it over here, over there. If we really want to get to that place where we are boundless, we have to allow God to walk us through all that junk so he can clean us up, cleanse us, give us clarity, heal us, get us so that all that baggage that we're trying to fight against is now gone. And
mm,
it's only going through it.
yeah.
It's like the
Yeah.
mess in your house is not going to get clean unless you go through it and sort and
Yeah.
get rid of what does, what is no longer needed.
Right. Yeah. And choose your heart. You know, it's going to be hard either way. Disobedience is hard because you're walking through the fire alone. Like,
Right.
that is way harder when you really look at the grand scheme of things. It's packaged pretty. It's got a beautiful little bow on it, and it looks appetizing. But when you're actually in it, it is hard because there's no one there for you. I mean, he's waiting, right, for you to turn to him, but there's nothing he can do until you turn to him. Um, and so as long as you're hard-hearted and stubborn and rebellious and walking in disobedience, anytime he's telling you, hey, just right here, right? And that's the main message. One of the main messages that I feel from the Lord right now is we we say we're not hearing from God. Why is God not answering me? What are you not obeying? He's been telling you something.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you've had a conversation with him, he's been telling you something. You just don't like his answer. You don't like his answer. You don't want to obey to his command. And so choose your heart. I mean, it's going to be hard either way. That what you're facing right now is hard because you're not hearing from God. You're not getting answers, right? So that's hard because you're doing this on your own. So you think, but
Mm-hmm.
it sometimes it's hard. That initial walking in obedience is hard, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it because you look back, you're like, oh, I'm so glad I was obedient to that. I'm so glad. I mean, I think about that sometimes whenever God just gives me a nudge to like just do something in the grocery store. Like, I don't know, like whether it's pay for someone's groceries or, even as simple as taking the cart back up to the grocery store instead of just putting it in the little thing, right? Just like actually walking it back up inside the store. Something as simple as that. Just that little, hey, go take this inside the store. It's raining out. Save those guys a little extra, time out in the rain so they don't have to be out in the rain for that one cart. Um, and obeying that and getting back in your car and be like, I'm glad I obeyed that. I could have. There was one of those little cart things right next to my car. I could have just shoved it right there and got in my car and went on my way. But I'm glad I went that extra mile because the Spirit told me to, and I know I obeyed a command. It could be simple things like that. Simple things like that we just obey, and it opens the capacity for more and more and more and more opportunities for us to just feel that fullness from him, that fulfillment from him of love. We are worshiping. That is an act of worship. And when we perceive everything we do, like Do I want this to be an act of worship to God? How can I make this an act of worship to God? Like, I could sit here and complain about this.
Mhm.
I could take shortcuts. I could cheat the system, right? I could, because guess what? Everyone else does. The government does. Our leadership does. Why can't I? We could do that. But do we want to make this an act of worship to God? We could be the one fish that swims upstream when all the rest are swimming downstream. We could do that. And that obedience will be blessed. That obedience invites favor into our life.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, well, I can choose worship or rebellion. That's kind of your choices.
Yep.
But I'm also thinking if I'm in a storm and I'm in my boat and my boat flips over in the storm and I'm like got waves coming over my head, do I want to be doing that by myself or do I want to have the one who can walk on water and tell the storm to calm?
Stop. Yeah, to be still.
Right? What do I want? What am I being obedient for? Protection. And love and to be seen and to be heard. Everything that we want and crave is found in that obedience.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the same concept with your kids, like you had explained. Like when your children are obedient to you, you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel loved.
Hmm.
You do because they're obeying your commands. They're they are hearing you, they are seeing you, they're obeying you. That is an act of love, to be heard, to be seen. So that's exactly how God feels when we do the same thing to him. He, like you said, Lori, he wants to be seen, he wants to be heard, he wants to be loved, just like we do. He created us in his image. I mean,
Hmm.
come on.
But also too, as a parent, and like I said before, like when I would tell my daughter, if you do this thing, then this is going to happen, and then it happens, and she comes crying to me, I always would open my arms and take her back, and I would love her, even though I said, "I see, see, I told you that would happen." God is the same. His arms are wide open all of the time, just waiting for you to walk back into them. And he'll pick you up and he'll bandage you and he will heal you and he will put you back next to him. And think about that. What does that mean to be next to him? He's a king on a throne. He owns everything. Everything
Hmm.
is his. So if you're his, guess what? All of his things are yours.
And I also want to highlight, I want to highlight really quickly, maybe you're in a place where your parents haven't been the type, they have always done things in your best interest, right? Because we can usually equate God to like our parental figures, right? Especially growing up. And so say your parents never really did things for your best interest. So, it's hard. It created that rebellion. It created that disobedience because they're asking me to do things that are not for the overall good. It's for their good. It's to make things easier on them, to benefit them, right? And God still says, honor your parents, right? But here's something that's super relieving for you is God's a perfect father. He's a perfect father, and everything he does is for your best interest. Even though it may not feel like it to you, because guess what? He sees the whole picture from up there. We don't see the whole picture. We think because this feels good that, oh, this is in my best interest. But, God's calling me to walk away from this. Like, what's he know? He knows everything, okay? First of all. And he's a perfect father. He wants what's best for you because his love is so immense for you. And so I just want to encourage you today, if you've been in that place where maybe your parental figure, maybe your guardian, whoever was that elder for you in your life that skewed your perspective on, that love. And maybe that's been the reason why you've been disobedient to God. He's not them. He's a perfect father and he is worth being obedient to. And, we still are called to honor and respect our elders, our parents, regardless of how they've treated us. And, maybe take that to prayer with God on what that looks like. But God is worth being obedient to because he loves you so immensely.
I just want to add to as I grew up with a parent that does this. The point of this is you may have a parent that didn't see you and they didn't hear you and they didn't love you in the way that you needed.
Yeah.
But even in that midst of your rebellion to that parent, God still saw you. He still heard you and he knew exactly what you needed that could have made all of that go away.
Yep.
And he still can. And he's still waiting for you just to bring it to his altar and throw it down at his feet and say, hey, help. Show me what it really looks like to be seen and heard and loved the way that I was designed to be. Because he's been doing it this whole time.
Yep.
It's just that he was focusing on you, but you weren't focusing on him. So when you turn your focus to him, then he really, really can focus on you. And then all of your
Right.
needs will be met.
Wow. That's so good. Well, I think we could end on that note. So I hope that you guys learned so much today about obedience and that the Holy Spirit is just moving within you and bringing you revelations, bringing you epiphanies, bringing you insight, and that you're going to be led into abundance. So thank you for tuning in, and until next time.